Your house is full of objects that are quietly obeying physics while you ignore it completely. Most of the time, that arrangement holds. Today, we're looking at 13 times it didn't. Ordinary things in ordinary garages and kitchens, storing more energy than anyone thought to check. Nobody here was doing anything exotic. That's the whole problem. Number 1. William Kim Jesko was 69 years old, and on a Sunday night in June, he was out in his garage in Manalapan Township, Pennsylvania, around 9:45. Whatever he was working on it near the air compressor. An air compressor is the most boring object in any garage. It sits in the corner. It makes a noise like a refrigerator having a bad time. Then it stops, and you forget it exists for another 4 years. That is exactly the arrangement it wants. Here's what's actually going on in there. Air has water in it. When you squeeze air, that water condenses out and pools at the bottom of the steel tank. And then it just sits. It rusts the tank from the inside, from the bottom, in the one spot you are never going to look at, because it's the spot that's facing the floor. Year after year, the steel gets thinner. Nobody sees it happen. The pressure gauge on the front certainly doesn't see it. The gauge measures pressure. It has no opinion whatsoever about how much wall is left to hold that pressure in. It will read a comfortable, healthy number right up until there is functionally no tank. So the compressor keeps doing its job, faithfully, for a decade or more, while quietly eating itself. That night, the arithmetic stopped working. The tank let go along the bottom seam. It didn't crack. It didn't hiss. It converted itself into a shockwave, and that shockwave took out the back wall of the garage. Not a window. Not a panel of siding. The wall. Jesko was taken to Uniontown Hospital, and he did not come back from that trip. Now here's the part I can't get past. On the bottom of every single air compressor tank, there is a tiny valve. It has one job in life. You open it, brown water dribbles out. You close it. 8 seconds. It's on page 1 of the manual, usually in bold, usually with an exclamation mark, because whoever wrote that manual knew exactly what happens to people who skip it. Almost nobody has ever touched theirs. I went and checked mine after reading this, and mine had water in it. I would love to tell you, I now do it every month. I did it once, felt like a responsible adult for about a day and a half, and have not been back since. Number 2. Milwaukee, 2016. 10 minutes to 9 in the morning. A man went round to a neighbor's place to take a look at a truck that needed some work. Completely ordinary errand. 2 guys, a truck, a garage, a morning. The garage door was propped open, not by the mechanism, by hand. Investigators believe it was being held up by a post hole digger, some scrap 2x4s, and a concrete stone, which is a sentence you can hear the entire ending inside of. That door weighed somewhere between 500 and 600 pounds, so call it 1/4 of a ton, suspended over a doorway, supported by a garden tool and some offcuts. One of the props shifted. He was underneath it. The door won. And here's the thing, almost everyone has wrong about garage doors. You think the motor lifts it. The motor does not lift it. The motor nudges it. The actual lifting is done by a steel spring above the door that has been wound up like a clock and spends every second of its life trying to unwind. A torsion spring for a 200-pound door stores enough energy to throw a 10-pound bowling ball 50 feet straight up in the air. That is what's living over your head every time you park, which means when the spring is healthy, the door is nearly weightless and you can move it with 2 fingers. And when the spring is broken or disconnected, or you've decided the job can be done with lumber and a rock, it goes back to being what it actually is. A 1/4 ton of steel with nothing under it but optimism. Number 3. Creston Avery had a pan of grease catch fire on his stove. And he did what nearly everybody does, because it feels like the responsible adult move. He picked the pan up, carried it to the sink, and turned on the tap. I want to be fair to him, because that is not a stupid instinct. Fire, water, sink. That sequence has been drilled into you since you were old enough to hold a cup. The problem is that a grease fire is not a fire in the normal sense of the word. It's a fire sitting on top of a liquid at something like 300 degrees Celsius, which is roughly twice as hot as your oven has ever been. And water has extremely strong feelings about that. Water is denser than oil. So when it lands in the pan, it does not sit on top and smother anything. It sinks. It goes straight down through the burning oil to the bottom of the pan, which is the hottest surface in the building. And there, all at once, it stops being water. 1 milliliter becomes about 1 3/4 liters of steam. A teaspoon becomes a small balloon, instantly, underneath a layer of burning oil. So it isn't a fire being put out, it's a fire being launched. And then it gets worse, because every droplet of oil that gets thrown up into the air is now surrounded by fresh oxygen on all sides. So each one lights. What was a contained pan fire becomes a fireball to the ceiling in under 1 second. Not a few seconds. 1. Faster than the sentence you just heard. The grease came back at him. He took 2nd and 3rd degree burns down both arms, deep enough that the pigment came out of his skin and never came back. He came through it, and he talks about it publicly now, specifically so other people don't repeat it, which I respect a great deal. Because the alternative is that everyone keeps learning this the same way, one kitchen at a time, forever. What makes it genuinely painful is that the correct move is less work than the wrong one. Turn the heat off, put a lid on the pan, walk away. That's the whole procedure. It requires you to do nothing, which is the hardest thing in the world when something in your kitchen is on fire. No sink, no carrying anything anywhere while it's alight, and no flour ever. Flour is not a fire extinguisher. Flour is fuel with an excellent public image. Number 4. Jeremy West was 40 years old, and he thought he knew how to open a bottle of champagne. Most people think that. It was Mother's Day. The cork went straight into his eye. He said the pain was searing, and he couldn't get the eye open at all at first. When he finally managed it, he couldn't see his own hand in front of that eye. Just light sources. Everything washed out yellowish orange. The retina had detached. That's the layer at the back of the eye doing the actual seeing. And it had come away from the tissue that feeds it oxygen. His ophthalmologist, Rahul Khurana, told him it needed surgery immediately or the eye was gone. The surgery worked. His vision came back. It never came all the way back. Here's why that bottle is more dangerous than it looks. The average bottle of champagne holds about 90 pounds per square inch. That's more pressure than the tires on your car. It sends the cork out at around 50 miles an hour, and it covers the distance from the bottle to your eye in under 0.05 of a second. Your blink reflex takes about 1/10. So you are not slow. You're just not invited. The whole event finishes before your nervous system is told it started. The last detail is the one that feels almost personal. Your eye socket is armored. There's a ring of bone all the way around it, whose entire purpose is stopping objects from reaching the eye, and it works extremely well against most of what life throws at you. A champagne cork is, by pure coincidence, exactly the right shape and exactly the right size to slip past all of that and land square in the middle. Which is why every ophthalmologist on the planet says the same thing every December into a void. Point it away from people, keep your thumb on it, and turn the bottle, not the cork. Number 5. Brick Kiln Lane, Rickling Green, Essex. The smoke alarm went off and the people in the house called 999, which is the single best decision anyone makes in today's video. Firefighters got there and found the bedroom curtains burning. No candle, no heater, no dodgy socket, no faulty wiring, nothing plugged in anywhere near it. There was a magnifying glass on the bedside table. That's it. That's the cause. Someone put a magnifying glass down on a bedside table. The sun came through the window at the correct angle at the correct hour, and the room caught fire. Sunlight arrives at about 1 kilowatt per square meter, spread across a whole room that's completely harmless, which is why you are not currently on fire. But a lens doesn't spread it. A lens collects every bit of light falling across its whole face and dumps all of it into a dot a couple of millimeters wide. Same energy, tiny area, and the number that actually matters goes up by hundreds of times. That's more than enough to take a cotton curtain past the point of no return. You already know this, by the way. Anyone who has ever been outdoors with a magnifying glass and a leaf knows this. The gap is that nobody makes the connection between that and the perfectly innocent glass object currently sitting on their windowsill, because in your head, those are two completely different categories of thing. They are not. It's the same lens. It's just indoors and pretending to be furniture. And the thing that makes this properly unsettling is that it only needs to line up once, not for hours. The lens sat there being an ordinary object every day for years, And then for about 20 minutes one afternoon, it was a weapon. And then it went back to being an ordinary object again. The London Fire Brigade logged 125 fires started by the sun over 5 years. The suspect list is not what you'd expect. Magnifying glasses? Yes. But also fish tanks, jam jars, glass door knobs, anything round and clear and left where the light can find it. Somewhere out there is a decorative glass paperweight that has been sitting on a windowsill for 11 years, waiting for one specific afternoon in June. Number 6. Fort Collins, Colorado. The 8th of October, 2017. A contractor had spent the day staining a wooden deck. Standard job. Finished up, packed up, and left the rags underneath the deck. Nobody lit anything. Nobody left a heater on. There was no ignition source anywhere near that house. Overnight, the rags caught fire by themselves. Raquel Max was 32. She was upstairs, and the fire took the stairs before she could. She didn't get out of that bedroom. So here's what actually happened under that deck. Wood stain doesn't dry the way water dries. It doesn't evaporate. It cures, which is a chemical reaction with oxygen, and that reaction gives off heat. Out in the open air, that heat just leaves and nothing happens. But a crumpled rag is a fantastic insulator. The heat generated in the middle of the pile has nowhere to go, so it stays. And warmer material reacts faster, which generates more heat, which makes it warmer still. That loop only has one ending. The pile heats itself, unaided, in the dark, with nobody in the county doing anything until it reaches ignition. And the temperature it needs to get to is only about 50 degrees Celsius. That's a warm bath. The fire department called it an accident and didn't name the contractor. And honestly, that's fair, because the number of people who know this is roughly nobody. The instructions are printed on the tin. Nobody has read the tin since 1970. Number 7. 1999. A 38-year-old arc welder was at a rural shop, repairing a large garbage truck. He needed to weld some brackets onto the back of it. Routine work, done by a man who had done it many times before. He needed somewhere to rest things while he worked, so he used what was standing right there, a steel 55-gallon drum, as a table. And I need you to understand that this is not a bizarre decision. Go into any workshop on the planet, and you will find a drum being used as a table, a stool, a bin, or a stand. It's the right height. It's flat on top. It holds weight. It is the most natural work surface in the room. Sparks from the welding got into that drum. Whatever had been in there before was still in there. Because here's the trick that catches experienced people, and it is genuinely counterintuitive. An empty drum is more dangerous than a full one. Not slightly, substantially. A full drum of solvent has almost no air in it, and fire needs air. But an empty one has a thin film left on the walls, evaporating quietly for months, filling that space with vapor mixed with exactly the right amount of oxygen. The emptier it looks, the closer it gets to perfect. You rinse it out, you turn it upside down, you leave it out in the yard for a whole year, and it is still sitting there in the ideal ratio, waiting. And there is no way to tell by looking. That's the cruel part. A drum that's genuinely inert and a drum that's a hand grenade are the same object from the outside. Same rust, same dents, same faded label nobody can read anymore. The only way to know is paperwork you don't have, from a company that stopped existing in the 90s. The drum let go. It knocked him down and started a fire around him. A colleague came running and found him on the ground with pieces of the drum still landing near him. And then it kept going, because the fire reached the propane and acetylene cylinders in the shop and set off a second round of explosions. He never got up from that one. The official safety literature on this has a phrase for it that I think about more than I should. Empty drums, potential bombs. That's it. That's the official wording. Somebody in a government office sat down, considered the tone, and went with that. And they were right to. Number 8. The 24th of July, 2015. Kentucky. A 22-year-old mower operator was cutting grass on a hillside. He was working alone. The slope was 30 degrees. That's a proper hill. Standing on it is a decision. And he was mowing horizontally across it, which is what a lot of people do, because going straight up and down a hill on a mower feels obviously worse. The mower slid. And once it started sliding sideways down a 30-degree slope, it stopped being a vehicle and became an object. It rolled over onto him at the bottom. The rest of the crew found him pinned under it. The medical examiner put it down to asphyxia from chest compression, which is the technical way of saying the machine simply sat on him and he couldn't move it. It's a riding mower, not a tractor, not a truck. Something you'd guess you could shove off if you had to. You can't. The report lists the contributing factors, and they're brutally plain. The slope was steeper than the manufacturer allowed. The machine, a Skag Turf Tiger, had no rollover protection bar fitted, and he was on his own, so nobody saw it start. The physics of a riding mower is unhelpful in a way people don't expect. It's heavy, it sits high, and the wheels are close together. That combination is fine on flat ground and quietly awful on a slope. Tilt it far enough, and the center of mass leaves the wheelbase, and after that, nothing you do with the steering matters. There is no gradual warning phase. It's stable, and then it isn't. And the gap between those two states is about a quarter of a second. Number 9. A clear, sunny January day in the Lake States. A 31-year-old logger, 4 years on the saw, working as one half of a two-man team. And I want to get the setup right, because this is the one that ruins the comfortable theory that these things only happen to careless people. He was fully trained. He was wearing all of his protective equipment. The chain brake on his saw was working correctly. He was not rushing. He was not improvising. He was not doing anything he hadn't done 1,000 times. He dropped a red oak. Then he started limbing his way up the trunk, which is the normal, methodical part of the job. The oak had landed on a hemlock sapling and flattened it, 2 inches thick. A sapling you would step over without registering it existed. It was lying flat on the ground under the big trunk, looking like nothing at all. He decided it wasn't under any real tension, and he put the saw into it about 18 inches up from the ground. The moment the chain touched it, the hemlock snapped straight and threw the running saw back at him. That's a spring pull. A young tree bent over and pinned by something heavier is a loaded spring, and a bent tree stores that energy along its entire length. But when it releases, all of it comes out at one point, the point you're standing at. The number that stays with me is the 2 inches. Not a huge trunk. Not something with visible menace. Forestry safety material puts the threshold at around 2 inches in diameter, which is to say the danger begins at the exact size where a reasonable person stops paying attention. There's a correct way to do it, and it takes about a minute. A series of shallow shaving cuts along the compressed side at the point of maximum bend, letting it straighten out gradually and boringly, a little at a time, until there's nothing left in it. One cut straight across instead, and it does the same amount of straightening in roughly 4 milliseconds. And this doesn't mainly get loggers. It gets people clearing their own land after a storm, because a storm is a machine for producing bent, pinned saplings by the hundred. Number 10. A 53-year-old man walked into an emergency department with a small cut on the back of his left hand, about 2 centimeters. Superficial. He'd been using a petrol-powered pressure washer. Now, if you triage that on appearance, it's a plaster and a tetanus shot, and you're home by lunch. It looks like the kind of injury you get from a garden fence. It was not a cut. It was a high-pressure injection injury. What actually happened is that the jet punched a pinhole through the skin and then kept going, driving water and whatever was on the surface of that hand deep into the tissue underneath, between the tendons, into the sheaths. Places nothing is supposed to be able to reach without a surgeon and a plan. The physics is embarrassingly simple. Pressure is force divided by area. Take a very ordinary amount of force and squeeze it through a nozzle a few tenths of a millimeter wide, and it will go through skin like skin isn't there. Skin is a good barrier against blunt things. Against a needle of water, it has no argument. And the reason this is on today's list is not the injury itself. It's the presentation. Another patient, 25 years old, arrived with a similar-looking mark and went on to develop compartment syndrome in his thumb and index finger, which is what happens when pressure builds inside a closed space in the hand and starts shutting off the blood supply. Up to 30% of high-pressure injection injuries end in amputation. 30%. From something that looks like a scratch. That gap is the whole danger. People wash it under the tap, put a plaster on it, and go back to the driveway, because nothing about it says emergency. By the time it starts saying emergency, the useful window has closed. It's one of the very few injuries where the correct response to a tiny wound is to go to hospital immediately and say the words high pressure injection out loud so somebody senior comes and looks at it in the next hour. Number 11. Halifax, West Yorkshire, 2019. A man was sitting in his car and decided it smelled bad, so he sprayed air freshener. Then he sprayed some more. Police later described the amount as excessive, which I think we can all picture without further detail. Then he lit a cigarette. The explosion blew the windscreen out of his car. It also took out windows in nearby business premises, which means the shockwave left the vehicle entirely and went looking for other things to break. He got away with minor injuries, which is genuinely remarkable and not something he earned. The bit that gets everybody is that people think of air freshener as a smell in a can. It is not. The smell is a passenger. The thing filling most of that can, the thing doing the work of pushing the smell out of the nozzle, is propane and butane. That's camping stove fuel. That's what's in a lighter. So what he had built, without ever intending to build anything, was a sealed metal box with a rich fuel and air mixture in it and himself sitting in the middle of it. And then he introduced a flame. The same cans do this without anyone's help if you leave them in a hot car, because pressure inside a sealed container rises with temperature and doesn't ask permission. A car interior in the sun goes to 60 or 70 degrees. Aerosol cans are rated to about 50. At a refinery in Beaumont, Texas, a deodorant can went off inside a parked car on a hot day with nobody anywhere near it. No cigarette required, just an afternoon. Number 12. October 2009. Francisco Garcia, a professional basketball player with the Sacramento Kings, was doing a strength exercise on an inflatable exercise ball, balancing on it while lifting weights. 90-pound dumbbells, one in each hand. The ball burst. He went down hard, with 180 pounds of iron still in his hands and no way to break his fall, and fractured his forearm. He missed 4 months. And this was the first year of a new contract extension, which is how a burst rubber ball ended up in a courtroom. The Kings sued the Italian manufacturer, Ledra Plastic, to recover the salary they'd paid a player who couldn't play. Garcia sued separately for lost earning capacity. It settled, quietly, with his lawyer describing the outcome as extremely favorable. The reason they had a case is the wording on the product. The ball was sold as burst resistant and rated to 600 pounds. Garcia plus the dumbbells was somewhere under 400. So it failed at a load well inside what the label promised, which is the sort of thing companies find difficult to explain in front of a judge. And it's worth knowing what burst resistant is supposed to mean, because most people assume it means it won't burst. It doesn't. It means that when it does fail, the material is meant to tear slowly and let you down to the floor over a few seconds. That's the entire safety feature. Not that it holds, that it gives up politely. When that fails, an exercise ball is genuinely a nasty piece of equipment because it holds you up by nothing but the tension in a thin skin. There's no frame. There's no second system. The instant that skin goes, the whole surface unloads at once, and you drop from about half a meter with your hands full and no time to do anything about it. Since the year 2000, there have been at least 47 documented injuries from these things. One person went down onto their chin, chest, and pelvis and spent the following months in surgery. Number 13. Hickman County, Tennessee. January. A 66-year-old man went up on the roof of a business to clear the snow off it, which was the right call. Snow is not weightless, and people wildly underestimate it. Fresh dry powder is fairly light, but wet snow can run to 20 pounds per square foot, and once you multiply that across a whole flat commercial roof, you are talking about tens of tons sitting on a structure that was designed for a number somebody chose decades ago. Roofs do come down. Clearing them is a real and sensible job, so he was doing the responsible thing. He was up there, in the cold, dealing with a hazard that a lot of people would have ignored and hoped about. He fell about 20 feet through a skylight onto a concrete floor. And this is the detail that makes it stay with you. Under a covering of snow, a skylight looks precisely like roof. Same color, same level, same everything. The snow doesn't only add weight to the building. It erases the map of which parts of it are solid. Every visual cue you would normally use to work out where you can put your feet is gone, and the surface underneath you tells one smooth, confident lie. Roofers have a whole procedure for this. You survey the roof before it snows, or from a window, or off a drawing, and you mark where the openings are with something tall enough to stand above the snow line. Because the moment it's white, your eyes are no longer a reliable instrument, and you're navigating from memory. He went through a hole that had been standing open in that roof the entire time he was up there. It was simply invisible. He was one of 6 people in the state who didn't come through that weak storm. And you can't really fault the logic that put him on that roof, which is what makes this one sit badly. He was managing a genuine risk. He was doing the thing the insurance company and the fire service and every article about winter storms tells you to do. He just did it, standing on top of the hazard instead of underneath it, and the surface he was standing on had been quietly redrawn overnight by weather. Every single thing on today's list has that same shape underneath it. The object hadn't changed. The compressor was still a compressor. The magnifying glass was still a magnifying glass. The roof was still a roof. What changed was that one afternoon the conditions lined up, and the object was allowed to be what it had always been. That's the list. 13 ordinary objects and 13 people who had no particular reason to expect any of it. If you made it this far, hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, and tell me below, which one of these do you have in your house right now, and how long has it honestly been since you looked at it?